Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Welcome, everyone joining in. We're so excited to have you all here with us today. Welcome to East Bay Sanctuary Covenant's webinar on the origins of the sanctuary movement. We're really thrilled to gather virtually tonight, as this is the first in a series of celebrations throughout 2022 that we'll be having to celebrate the 40th anniversary of EBSC. So this is a very special event indeed, and we're just really thrilled to have all of you here with us tonight. My name is Ella Banerjee. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Community Partnership Coordinator at Voice of Witness, which is an oral history organization based out of San Francisco. And Voice of Witness is so lucky to be a long-term community partner of East Bay Sanctuary Covenant. And so we're really thrilled to be part of this event. As we get started, I first want to acknowledge that if we were gathered physically together in one place, we would be thanking and acknowledging those whose Indigenous lands we are gathered on. Because we're virtual, I'll encourage people in the chat. You can visit natives-land.ca if you don't already know, to learn and acknowledge whose Indigenous lands you're on. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm calling from Ohlone land, also known as Berkeley, California. So I want to thank and acknowledge the Ohlone people as the rightful stewards of the land that I'm calling on tonight. I want to also share that our next event in this 2022 40th anniversary celebrations will be the 40th anniversary spring fundraising reception for EBSC, which will be taking place both in person and live streamed on May 14th from 4 to 6:30 p.m. at St. John's Presbyterian Church in Berkeley. You can visit our 40th anniversary webpage to learn more about all of our celebrations this year and to contribute to our 40th anniversary campaign. And I believe that link is popping in the chat soon. So it's a way to get involved with all the events that we'll be having and join us to celebrate 40 years of EBSC. As we get started with our panel soon, I also want to let all of our attendees know that we will be using the Q&A function to receive your questions throughout the webinar. And so our panelists will do their best to answer them. We will have some time in the later half of tonight's webinar for them to answer them. So go ahead and share your questions in the Q&A box, which should be at the bottom of your screen. We really have a truly incredible group of panelists today, all of whom have played a very critical and meaningful role in the early years of the sanctuary movement, and who continue to play key roles in different ways and are leaders in their wisdom and in their activism. And so we're so grateful to have them here with us today. I want to give a warm welcome to our moderator, Eileen Purcell, and our other speakers, Jose Artiga, Jose Cartagena, Marilyn Chilcote, and Locke Schultz-Jaeger. Thank you all so much for being here tonight. It's truly an honor to gather with you virtually in this space and to listen to your insights and your wisdom and your memories, and also your words of wisdom of how we can look forward to what is needed now and the next years ahead of the sanctuary movement. I'd like to now introduce, if she's ready, it's my honor to introduce Sister Maureen Dagnan, who's the Executive Director of EBSC. Sister Maureen, if you're ready, if you want to turn your camera on and join us, we are ready for you. I think we just need you to unmute, Sister.
Thank you. That good? Okay, thank you. Well, I am very pleased that I have the honor of introducing a very special person whom I've known for many years, Eileen Purcell, moderator for the evening. And we couldn't have had a better moderator. Eileen has many claims to fame. In addition to being the co-founder of the U.S. Sanctuary Movement in 1982. And I believe it was at the tender age of 23, between 80 and 82, that Eileen had already been on the board of SHARE, and as well as being the executive director. SHARE is a nonprofit in Washington, D.C., and dealing with Salvadorian humanitarian aid and research and education. And even at that age, Eileen already was both on the board and executive director. And She was lead organizer for the Catholic Social Services in her native San Francisco a little bit later or during that time. And then she turned her sights to the East Bay with questions, what can we do with the refugee crisis? Uh, so together with a group of about 6 congregations, including Catholic, Presbyterian, Episcopalian, Methodist, and I'm sure I'm leaving out some, but they gathered together as a discernment group and try to answer that question as well as to, they discerned as well as to discern with the refugees and to listen to their painful stories to help them on the way. So it was through this that the vision of sanctuary emerged, and on March 24, 1982, the movement began, and it began in Berkeley. The mission was very clear. The mission was huge as well as being clear. It was to protect through sanctuary the refugees, to change the U.S. policies and that were producing refugees, and to end the military aid that was given to El Salvador. So what a challenge. But Eileen, through your vision as co-founder, you planted the seed with the others that had accompanied you, but you really were the lead. So you planted that seed that has flourished for 40 years. And today, on the 40th anniversary of Saint Oscar Romero, he will be very happy, in solidarity with all refugees all over the world, there are so many, we launch our celebration. And we are so grateful to you, Eileen, for placing us on that path, which has been a wonderful gift to the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sister Maureen. My heart is moved, and we are so pleased and honored to join with you and with your team, the staff, the volunteers, and all who have joined tonight as we mark the anniversary of EBSC's birth and our beloved Oscar Romero. Tonight, we're going to share some of the stories that sparked and sustained us through the early years of the 80s, early 90s, and that call some of the lessons that continue to inform the work as we all meet the times in which we're living. But I've been asked to give a bit of context. Maureen, you started us, but let me just add, literally 40 years today in synchronized press conferences at the University Lutheran Chapel in Berkeley and at Southside Presbyterian Church in Tucson, Arizona. 5 congregations in Berkeley, 1 in Arizona declared public sanctuary. And it was the 2nd anniversary of the death of our beloved Oscar Romero, and who had been brutally assassinated while saying Mass. A couple of weeks before his murder, Oscar Romero had written President Jimmy Carter, imploring him to stop military aid, saying, "It is killing my people." And the day before he was killed, while celebrating Mass at the Metropolitan Cathedral in San Salvador, Oscar Romero made a direct appeal to the armed forces that had been trained and funded by the United States. And he said, "I beg you, I implore you, I command you to stop the repression." There were about 1,000 Salvadorans being killed every month. Tiny country, no more populous than the larger metropolitan area of the Greater Bay Area, which now goes from Tracy to Vacaville. Incredible bloodshed. Priests, teachers, labor leaders, catechists, students, campesinos, all of our counterparts. That same year later, the Salvadoran armed forces would kill 4 US church women, rape them, kill them. And the news shocked the world. So the body of, in the Christian tradition, the body of Christ was being tortured and on that cross. And that was the context in which the work emerged and evolved. That was the moment that the public sanctuary movement began to ferment. And it was a movement that invited and continues to invite each of us, I believe, to ask, what do we do? What do the times require of us as people of faith? And how do we live on the prophetic edge? What was different about the public sanctuary movement is that we asked these questions in community. The lectionary group that was comprised of the different congregations, Bob and Marilyn, St. John's Presbyterian, Gus and Locke's, University Lutheran Chapel, congregations met, and we developed a discernment process that examined US history, theology, the law, both domestic and international, and the risks. But at the heart of the discernment program was the people like Jose Cartagena and Jose Artiga. It was the refugees themselves who came and stood with us and rendered their story of anguish, a story that was contradicted over and over again by the administration of the Reagan presidency. But they told the truth, and our government was telling lies. What were some of the keys of that discernment process? One, well, we studied, we examined, we met the people of El Salvador, of Guatemala. We listened and examined the moral imperatives and asked ourselves, what is the cost of discipleship? And what's the cost of acting and of not acting? The second was we had a covenant, and I believe it was Steve Knapp out of St. John's Presbyterian, who was in the English department at UC Berkeley, who drafted the first edition. What was the covenant? The covenant was, as Maureen said, to protect, defend, and advocate for refugees in the face of horrific violence that happened to be sponsored by our government, and the policy of summary deportation in direct violation of US law, 1980 Refugee Act. And the third key was a secret ballot election. Every individual member of the congregation of the community was invited to vote your conscience. Be true to your heart. And so we did. Before I get to what happened then, what were the risks? Let's be very clear. For the refugees who had been telling their stories in many venues, both Jose Cartagena, Jose Artiga, Silvio Tavis-Feig, Gloria Cañas, there's so many who risked, but they risked deportation and death, and their families in El Salvador risked retribution. And they risked the trauma of repeating their trauma, reliving it. What did we who accompanied them risk? Well, we risked arrest, yes, conviction, prison, maybe the loss of a job or a license. Congregations, institutions risked losing their 501c3 status. We had to live with the potential of division of our communities, conflict. We hate conflict, but we had to wrap our arms around it, and we did. So what happened? Oh, and law enforcement had begun to crack down, and I need to say their names. Stacy Merkt and Jack Elder out of Brownsville, the Catholic Diocese of Brownsville, Texas, had been arrested, had been charged, and were going to jail. So what happened? EBSC was born out of 3 weeks of discernment and a whole generation of practice that Bob McKenzie, Marilyn Chilcote, Gus Schultz, and all the others brought from their lived experience. 3 weeks of discernment, overwhelming vote to declare public sanctuary. And we stood in the sanctuary of University Lutheran Chapel. Jose Artiga was one of the first who was there and declared our allegiance to what we believe was good and whole. And the rest is history. It became national news. And from the East Bay Sanctuary Covenant, which provided social services, legal services, accompaniment, went to El Salvador, went to Honduras, wherever we were asked to go by our Salvadoran counterparts, our Guatemalan counterparts. That partnership was crucial. We did. There's two notes that I have to end on before I go to our panelists. One is we didn't know how it would turn out. Before he died, Gus Schultz shared in his oral history, we didn't know if it was going to last a couple of weekends or if it was going to last a lifetime. Well, I think we can say the record is clear. EBSC is flourishing and continues the good work. And many of us in this circle also. And the second thing I need to share is there are many stars in the sky. There are many stars in the sanctuary movement, many of whom are here tonight, but many who are not. There are too many to name. And that was part of the beauty. It was a decentralized movement. and all were welcome, and hundreds of thousands of men and women across borders, across generations participated. And it flourished and continues to animate and dynamize movements today. And it is one of the great privileges of my life. So I would like to now turn to our panelists. And the first person we want to invite to share a bit of his story is Jose Cartagena, lovingly known as Cartita to some of us, who was one of the first refugees in San Francisco to win political asylum because of how compelling his case was, in spite of the administration's policy of summary deportation. 98% of all cases were denied, and later we prevailed in the American Baptist case et al. Many of the congregations on this call and many others across the country, we prevailed and reopened nearly 500,000 cases. But Cartito is one of the first. So today he continues to work at Catholic Social Services and is a leader in the immigrant community. So Jose, can we ask you just to share your story of coming to this country and what the role Sanctuary had in your life?
Thank you. I just want to start thanking Isabel Sanctuary Cabinet, Sister Marine, Joe, Eileen, everyone. When I was invited to participate in this important event, I said yes, it's an honor for me because to share the wonderful stories that we have. And it's too many stories that I would like to share, but I want to start saying that I was forced to leave my country because of the persecution. I was joining with my father the Christian-based communities in El Salvador. I come from Chalatenango, another part of El Salvador. Today I was talking to Lisa, and she was mentioning May 14. Immediately I put back myself, May 14, 1980. What was happening then with my life? May 14, 1980, I was in front of my house when I saw through the window, a convoy of maybe 15 to 14 trucks full of soldiers going to another part of Chalatenango. Happened that before that, thousands of persons had been refugees, persecuted from the towns, and they were refugees in the border between Honduras and El Salvador. That day, May 14, 1980, was the day with the massacre of Sumpul River happened, where more than 640 persons were killed, including children. I was participating with my student from my school, supporting them. I was persecuted because I was involved in the Christian-based communities, a student organization, trying to change El Salvador. I was accused to be a communist. Then there is no other way, I have to leave. Everything was okay. My father and mother was able to hire a coyote. You have to leave because they were looking for you. I prefer you out. I never gonna see you, but not there. Then I have to leave. I was 17 years old back then. Everything was okay. As a refugee coming from El Salvador, I didn't know better. I was say, okay, you will cross the Arizona, you will cross the United States border by plane. Everything is gonna be okay. Okay. We get to the border between Arizona and Mexico, the Sonora. They say, okay, the plane is not coming. You have to walk. Okay, how many hours we can walk? That's what the coyotes say. They say to us, 12 hours. Okay, for us as a Salvadorian, walking 12 hours is nothing. Turn out that after walking the first 12, 13 hours in the Arizona desert, the first person died. We were a group of 42, 13 people died, 13 people survived, and the rest were able to make it through different way. What I'm gonna tell you next, I'm gonna tell you because that was my other people in the trip told me after they rescued us because I was in coma when the immigration rescued us in the Arizona desert. To be able to survive, we were able we drink our own urine during caucus. And when I wake up in a hospital in Ajo, Arizona, I was surrounded by a group of a family, and they were asking me, why do you come to this country? I say, I was persecuted. One of the questions they were asking me is, what do you think about the president of El Salvador? I say, Duarte is a traitor, he's killing our people. That's why we are leaving. But the surprise came later. I was in the hospital for a few days, then awake in the jail in Arizona. But the surprise was the response of the North American people and the faith community, where these people who were in the hospital turned out to be the best supporters for us, organized a campaign to get the money needed to get us out of jail. The lady who was crying next in the hospital bed when I was there turned out to be the President Duarte's aunt, that became one of the best supporters of our struggle, and denouncing his nephew policies. The entire family became organized. I ended up working in solidarity in communities in Arizona. The churches become together, support us. I live in Arizona for a year and a half, more or less. In that work, I received a phone call from San Francisco. And because they asked me, Jose, there is an event here that I believe you will be helpful that you participate. And I asked what the event is. It was a hunger strike. Okay, if that's what you need me to do, I'm willing to do it, because we were involved in educating the North American community about that, why we were here, to denounce that the reason we are here was the result of the failed policy of the United States administration. We were the counterpart of what the government here was saying. And they told me we need to do that. And okay, I ended up in a hunger strike in San Boniface Church, February, I believe, 28, 1982. I still have the slides here as some memories. I met Jose Artiga, Eileen Purcell. We were a group of 6, 7 people, but that group grew up because other people were joining us. I remember when a French priest joined us in the hunger strike, and people were just coming to us and join us. Juanita la Chilena, I remember we loved Juanita, joining us in our struggle to educate the North American. But then I remember another person, Castro, when he came to the hunger strike, asking questions, why we were here. That happened February 1982. And the hunger strike, I believe, was scheduled to last from February 28 to March 24, the Archbishop Romero anniversary. But then we had the support of the different churches and sanctuary was declared. And that's what we are celebrating here. And after the hunger strike, we didn't have a place to live, where to live. Then Father Cucholian Moriarty opened his door and opened his church, and we become resident at the Most Holy Redeemer Church. And not just for the key group of people who participate in the hunger strike, but also open his convent for everyone. And we participate. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Jose. I'm going to stop you there, and we're going to come back to you when we talk about lessons. But in the interest of time, I want to hear the rest of that story. But can I turn now to you, Locke, as we segue from Gus coming and inviting the hunger strikers to join us at the press conference. I think he promised you food, did he not, Cartita? Didn't he promise to have a very wonderful buffet?
Oh, yes.
But let me introduce Locke Schultz, who was a teenager, I believe, Locke, if I can convey that, and who was an active member in her community of the University Lutheran Chapel, where her father was pastor. Her mom was very active. And many people don't know, Locke, that University Lutheran Chapel declared public sanctuary in 1971 for sailors who were soul searching whether or not to return to the theater of war in Vietnam. And that your dad, along with other faith leaders, Paul Fitch, developed the first rendition of the discernment process that we used for Central America for Vietnam. And then your dad proposed it to the lectionary group. So what story comes to mind that you'd like to share about the sanctuary work, either from when you were that young teenager or now as you look retrospectively as a leader at the University Lutheran Chapel, as the president of the Share Foundation? What would you like to share, Locke?
Thanks, Eileen. I'm really, really honored to be here and feel like I'm sort of sitting here holding my dad's space for him, because this is all of you together with him. I think you touched on, for me, reflecting that sanctuary has sort of always been present in my life. It's just always been there. It's not just this ancient tradition in the Christian faith, but that it sort of feels like an ancient tradition in my life from 1971 and on into 1982. And I have learned so much from everyone, and I don't presume to know or to experience, but to hear the stories from all of the refugees who came was moving in the moment and continues to be important in reflection. And when I think about a story, I find myself these days reflecting on sanctuary, not just because it's 40 years for East Bay Sanctuary Covenant, but also given the world events. And I think about what makes someone flee. And I think of the stories from Cartita and from Jose and from many others. And I wonder in my own life, what would make me flee? And then to think about the need for safety and the fear in those moments and what we long for. And the story that comes to mind for me is the Going Home campaign in October of 1987. The refugees had been in Mesa Grande refugee camp for many as long as 7 years, and over 4,000 were planning to go back and had reached out for support and had asked for international delegations to come. And many from the University Lutheran Chapel had traveled to El Salvador and to Guatemala and to Mesa Grande and Honduras. And so I joined in on a delegation with Share in the Going Home campaign and went with many others, Lana Dahlberg and so many others. And we took a group to Mesa Grande. And as everybody was getting ready to get on the bus and we were organizing the getting there, and the buses are filling with people with bags of belongings and their children and their chickens and their meager belongings, and they're going home. And some of these kids are going to El Salvador, which they know is their home that they've never even lived in. And I get on the bus with them, and there's excitement and there's tension, and the chickens are squawking and the babies are crying, and we're moving in buses towards the border. And I know that others, Jose and my dad and Eileen, were you there at that moment? I can't remember. They're at the border working out whether the buses will get through and what will happen and who will receive them on the other side. And then it becomes clear that they're not going to let any internationals go through on the buses. And so the people get worried and we get worried. And as the buses move forward, the soldiers are getting onto each bus with their weapons slung over their shoulders, and they're identifying each international and asking them to get off the bus or telling them to get off the bus. And everybody's a little worried. And the people sitting around me tap me on the shoulder and say, "Don't worry, we've got you." And they give me a baby to hold and a chicken, a live chicken. And I lean forward with my dark hair covering me, and the soldier walks by. and leaves the bus. And we go forward and they pat my shoulder, and there's just such an incredible feeling when I think back to it of what we thought we were providing of a safety and what it means to accompany people and to keep each other safe and to walk together in the face of all the things that we're committed to change and to make better. And we got to the border and the bus rolled through the frontage and came to the space between the two countries, and more soldiers got on. And this time they didn't believe the baby and the chicken in my arms, and they had me get off, and I returned the baby and I returned the chicken, and I got off the bus and turned around and walked back to where the rest of that delegation was, including my father, who said, "What are you doing? How did you go over there?" But as I reflect now back on that time, and I really do think about what it is to be together, and it's so vivid. I can still feel that baby in my lap and that chicken. Haven't held a chicken since. And I'm very happy to be here today. And I do have thoughts about what we think about in the future, and I will pass it back to you, Eileen. Thank you.
Thank you, Locke. And that's a perfect segue to Marilyn Shillcoat. Marilyn and Bob McKenzie were co-pastors at St. John's Presbyterian Church. And they co-founded the Sanctuary Movement and continue their work today in support of Honduras through the Share Foundation and the movement to remain, the right to remain, another variation of the going home movement. Marilyn, you and I first met when I spoke in 1980 at the San Francisco Theological Seminary, and you were part of that lectionary group when you and Gus invited me to come and talk about refugees, the US supported wars, and how we could do more. And you and St. John's and Bob had done so much already. You had resettled political refugees from Chile, from Argentina. You'd been here before. And then we got a call. We had a family, Omar, Ingrid, and their baby had given birth at St. Mary's Catholic Hospital in San Francisco. And we brought them to Most Holy Redeemer, got the crib, but they needed a longer term place. And he said they can come here before the declaration of public sanctuary. And then you led East Bay Sanctuary Covenant, helped start San Francisco Sanctuary Covenant, and worked with Chicago Religious Task Force with across the country. So I wanted to ask you, Marilyn, is there a story you would share that was transformative for you personally and for your ministry?
No problem. The question is, how can we limit them down? I want to share the first thing that I remember when Jose recruited. Jose said, you know, your congregation has people that you're hiding from the government. That's wonderful, but we need you to know more about the situation. We need you to understand what our people are going through. And they said, you ought to go, he said, you ought to go down to the refugee camp in Honduras. Well, after another discernment process, and there are several camps down there, but there was a very large one at Mesa Grande. After another discernment process, our congregations I was a pastor at one of the pastors under my supervising pastor, Robert McKenzie, at St. John's Presbyterian, commissioned me in a worship service on a Sunday morning to go down and represent them. And I went the next day, I went to have lunch with Jean Getchell, who was the wife of the Episcopal pastor. And I says, hey, why don't you come with me? I'm all by myself on this trip. So she says, fine. Within days, we were in the air on the way to a city in Honduras in the north, where we got off, we got on a public bus, we spent the night somewhere. I remember the hotel. And then we got on another public bus in the morning. And finally, we got to a major intersection and pitched a ride on a pickup truck into the gates of the Mesa Grande refugee camp, showed our hastily gathered credentials, and they let us in. We were warmly welcomed, and I was really surprised. We were warmly welcomed by what turned out to be a really well organized and really very chaotic gathering of something like 3, 4, the number kept growing in this camp, 1,000 people, more than half of them children, scattered over these Honduran hillsides, trying to build something like a community. That first afternoon, we were tired and jet lagged, and I wandered out to a tree that was sitting near our tent, and I commented on a woman's baby there. I said, "This is such a beautiful child," and she says, "Oh, this is not my baby." Turns out that she was one of the survivors of that Rio Lempa massacre, Cortita. And she was one of the survivors. She says, "I was lucky to rescue this child floating in the river." The mother was never located, but she was nursing that child and felt like it was a real privilege for her to raise this child of someone who lost their life in that horrible time when the refugees were trying to get across the river, being shot at by Salvadoran military on one side and then Honduran military on the other side. That's a whole nother story I'm not going to tell you because it goes on. That night we attended a Catholic mass, and it was led by delegates of the word. They didn't, who are Catholic lay leaders. And I was familiar with many of the elements of the worship service. You know, there was kneeling and there was prayers of confession and there were responses. And I was trying to follow the order of service all in Spanish. And my Spanish was not so understatement, not fluent yet. And it got to the point of the homily and I heard my name. And I was invited to come up and give the word. Well, when I picked myself up off the floor, fortunately, I didn't try to bully my way through that and improvise something. I had the wit to say, you know, we are so honored. I'm so honored personally, and we are here to listen. We're here to learn. We want to know more about you folks who I'm already coming to love. And so please allow us to do that tonight. And I tried to get out as gracefully as I could. And boy, was I glad that I did, because the next day in the morning, we were given a tour of the camp. And in the morning, we went to a class where they were instructing young women of the camp to be Sunday school teachers. They went through a normal course. I thought it sounded like standard kind of moral guidance, you know. You have to be models for the children you're going to encounter. And you have to be gentle. And please learn to always tell the truth, to keep yourself sexually pure. And then he said, and most of all, you are not to hate. Because to hate is to be caught in the jaws of a tiger. That image stayed with me. That afternoon, we went to hear testimonies from some of the refugees, why they were here, what they were fleeing from. And one of them was the guy who was teaching that class. His name was Pablo, as I recall. He told us about how the Salvadoran military entered the little mountain village where he was somewhere in the leadership. And they lined up the whole village for inspection. They just felt they had the right to establish some order on these people who lived peacefully in this village for, I don't know, maybe hundreds of years up in the hills. And they said, we're here to give you a warning. You are not to have anything to do with those resistance fighters who are up farther on the mountain above you. You're not to be in touch with them. You're not to give them any food. You're not to hide them. In fact, it's so dangerous to do that. And they said, we're going to show you just how dangerous. And the way he tells the story, they picked a young teenager from the group at random. And they took this kid up to a fence and they tied him to the fence. And he had his arms out like cross shape. And he said, then they beat him. And then they opened up his scalp and pulled it down toward the sides of his head. He says, and then they took my son's genitals and cut them off and put them in his mouth. Well, I was sitting in that audience, shaken in ways that's already catching me again. And I remember saying to him, Pablo, this morning I heard you tell a group of young women that they were not to hate, because to hate was to be caught in the jaws of a tiger. And right now I am so full of hate. I can't express it. How can you do that? How can you say that? He was quiet when he answered, and he said something to the effect of, how can I not? We are followers of Jesus. And Jesus taught us that love is the only way. In the years that followed, we watched these as the local refugees, and that I'm talking about the refugees in the camp still. We watched as the refugees in the camp, part of which where Pablo was one of the leaders, continued to organize their activities together, continued to organize their communication among some of us as we began to take these stories back, as we sent more and more people down to the camps to hear those stories. And we watched as they took this nonviolent idea that we shouldn't hate. These are still our brothers and sisters. And they took that and grew it until they were finally ready, to, in a nonviolent effort, return to the homes where the military didn't want them. In a huge nonviolent effort, there was this Going Home campaign that Locke spoke of. Actually, there were two campaigns where and Bob and I participated in one that's life-changing for us, maybe. In fact, that's part of the story you're going to tell for us tonight, isn't it, Bob?
Maybe we should segue to Bob. Thank you so much, Marilyn, for that powerful story. We could listen to so much more, but Bob, would you like to add anything before we go on to Jose?
You got to unmute yourself, dear. Or somebody has to unmute Bob. There.
Just a short addendum to what Marilyn said. It was my belief that the delegations that went to Central America, to El Salvador, were the heart of Sanctuary. It was good work. It's always been good work to provide them with opportunities once they get to this country But Jose, in particular, insisted that we go there to see the conditions under which they were subject. So I'm going to follow up just one little incident to the story that Marilyn told it. We went down there in 1988 taking a delegation of 9 people, and we, I don't want to go through all that we said, but it's, we saw, our aim was to visit encampments and campesinos and displaced by the war waged between the army and the guerrilla bands, to lend them encouragement, to express our solidarity with them, and to provide them token economic aid, to become informed about their plights. In one village we visited, our visit to an encampment on the site of a bombed out village.
Bob's reading out of his memoir, and it's a great memoir. Keep going, dear.
A bombed out village was especially poignant. The children welcomed us with raucous enthusiasm and were overjoyed with the small gifts we brought them. One of the village elders approached us and began talking about the significance of our visit, likening it to the visit of the Magi to the infant Jesus. He says, we came with our riches and gifts to a place where God's kingdom was being born, to bear witness to this new birth of hope in the midst of a violent world. And then we would return home to validate its significance for the world, which from our point of view was an astonishing statement of faith. Needless to say, we were deeply moved by this eloquence. It was these nuggets of wisdom, these nuggets of faith statements that we heard over and over again in our visits down there that imbued with us with such hope and astonishment at the power of the gospel in the lives of these people. One Catholic priest says, who taught at the UCA, he says, when I'm at the UCA teaching there, I have no sense of the presence of God. But when I get in my car on Friday afternoon, pass through 4 military checkpoints, and arrive in the village where I'm a pastor, he says, the place is filled with the presence of God. No, the word he said was thick. The place is thick with the presence of God. John Cortina. Mm-hmm. He, as you know, was a marvelous witness to what's going on down there. And is John Cortina still living, do you know?
No, he died a few years ago.
He
but
did.
His work continues through Pro Búsqueda.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Bob and Marilyn. I'm going to pivot to our last panelist, and we will come back to everyone when Ella guides us through some of the lessons. But I want to introduce everyone to Jose Artiga, who was one of the very first refugees to stand, was at the first press conference that birthed the EBSC, a linchpin. Quick story, when Gus Schultz asked me, who should I talk with? Who should we talk with in the Salvadoran community to explore public sanctuary? I said, you want to talk to Jose Artiga. He was known as Jose Escobar at the time. And Gus met with him, and Jose's response was, thank you, but no thanks, too risky. Gus did not give up. He said, follow-up meeting.
Your voice
back,
broke up.
And Jose said, Gus was persistent. Follow-up meeting with Jose, and Jose said, how many of us do you need? I will be there. So it is with great joy to present Jose Artiga, who in full disclosure is also my life partner. Jose, could you share a little bit about your journey and what it means, sanctuary, to you?
Buenas noches. Good evening. First, I want to start by thanking EBSC for organizing this beautiful celebration of the 40th anniversary of Sanctuary. Gracias, Hermana Maureen, and all the members of EBSC. Today is also the 42nd anniversary of the assassination of Monsignor Romero, who gave his life to the struggle for justice. But following Romero is not easy, because he asked us first to do something. When you learn about an issue, you cannot, keep with your arms crossed. You must do something. He doesn't tell you what. When you see injustice, you need to do something. Then he asked us to do more. How much more? Until it feels uncomfortable. What do you mean to feel uncomfortable? Well, when you advocate against injustice, the people in power do not like it. And they will persecute you. Sometimes, they just might want to discredit you, fire you, put you in jail. And if you keep going, they might even kill you. So tonight and today, I invite you to follow Romero. 1980, was one of the worst years of the war in El Salvador, with scorched earth, counterinsurgency strategy that was designed, was planned after all the experiences in Vietnam. Thousands of teachers, catechists, union leaders, students, and many people were assassinated. They thought that by killing, the bad guys, the problem will be over. It did exactly the opposite. It didn't work. I remember that every day as I was, waiting for my bus on my way to the university, I will see on the mayor's building porch dismembered bodies, not knowing that one day was going to be my body there. I was in my last year of engineering at the Catholic University, and that day stopped my career as I have planned it. I wanted to be an engineer to get out of the hall. It was June 27, 1980, just a few months after the assassination of Romero. 10 p.m., the death squad came looking for me in my family's home in San Martin. The same night, probably at the same time, the death squad visited 4 of my classmates, and their dismembered bodies were found the next day. The 5 of us were the only university students in San Martin to become the doctor, the lawyer, the accountant, the agronomist of the town. The death squad came to my house, but fortunately, I was not home. So that's why I'm telling the story here. This was terrible for me and for my family. My mother and sisters left the farm that very night, not the next day, but that very night, and became displaced and never returned to the house. It ended the way we had lived for generations in the farm. And going to the city is not easy for a farmer. Going to the city is a jungle. My mother said, if you love me, leave now. Just like that, send me a tiny little piece of paper that says, if you love me, leave. No questions, no discussion, no nothing. And within 48 hours, I was in Guatemala. The next day in Guatemala, and 3 months later, I was in the United States. In Guatemala, I worked making choco bananos, and we'll get up at 3 in the morning to go to the market to buy the bananas, and then you put them in chocolate, and then we sold them. But at the market, at that time in the morning, there was a whole community, and immediately we become friends. So as we arrive, Niña Maria is waiting with coffee, boiling coffee and pan dulce to start us the day. And they say, don't go to the US, stay here. But at that time, Guatemala was even worse than in El Salvador. As a refugee arriving in a new country is very hard. You don't know anybody and have to find a place to sleep tonight. You need to find food and you need to survive. One way or another, you have to survive and stay alive. In Mexico is a big city. Mexico was, for me, like a gigantic city and nowhere to go. So I went to a musical group called Los Panchos and told them, I follow you every song. I'm your best follower in El Salvador, and I'm in trouble and I'm looking for housing. They look at me and probably I was very convincing. And they said, you can stay here for 1 week, exactly 1 week, no more. That week, was a blessing. And I believe the spirit of my mother was looking and taking care of me to get that 1 week, to plan the next step. Then I move on to Austin, Texas. I arrived at a Casa Latina and they gave me shelter in the attic, tiny little space, not finished. And what I remember about that attic is that was the hottest place I ever been. You need a fan to barely try to make to go to sleep. But the good thing was that I got a job the next day. Guess where? In the cafeteria of the university with thousands of students eating for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And guess what? Lots of leftover food. So I will place the trays of food near the exit, and then later on I pick them up and bring them home. And I became the most popular resident of Casa Latina because I provided plenty of food. From Austin, I moved to San Francisco. They say Austin is okay, but the action is in California. So I moved to San Francisco and found sanctuary. Long story, but I found sanctuary at Most Holy Redeemer in the Castro area. We did not call it sanctuary at the time, but we were given presentations, we were sharing our testimonies, and we were building the solidarity movement as well as the anti-intervention movement. When Eileen Purcell and Bishop Gus Schultz proposed sanctuary, my initial response was, not a good idea. I didn't know, what sanctuary was, but they were persistent. They keep on asking, and then I said yes. If you think it's good for the refugees, and if you think it's going to help stop the U.S. intervention, let's give it a try. And one of the great gifts of sanctuary for me and for the community was that the sanctuary helped to accompany our families in Mesa Grande. That was thousands of families in that flow that Maryland and many others organized to Honduras was a line life with our families. Sanctuary also accompanied our families when they were going home. Remember, home is a very important place, no matter if it's a war. So that was very, very powerful. And you have joined us, for 40 years. Like in this very moment. We as refugees support the right to live, the right to migrate, but we also support the right to remain. We have the right to stay, and we will stay as the conditions are favorable. So I want to talk more about the right to stay later on, but I want to give thanks to Sanctuary for being creative, for walking with us, for listening to the stories, and as Romero said, for doing something, for doing it until it's uncomfortable. And many of you have gone the extra mile and dedicated no hours, but dedicated your life to the struggle. Gracias.
Thank you so much, Jose. And now I'm going to pass the mic back to you, Ella, to take us to the next chapter.
Yeah, thank you so much, Eileen. And thank you to all of our incredible speakers, to Jose Cartagena, to Locke, to Marilyn, Bob, Jose Artiga, and to Eileen for guiding us through so gracefully. I know, just like all the other attendees, I was just listening. It was just so much appreciation for all of your stories. And I want to thank you for your generosity, for so generously and personally sharing these stories. And I think it's clear that these stories and these memories are still so real, and real with the pain and the trauma and the memories of those we lost to violence. But there are also memories that are full of friendship and love and passion and solidarity and of hope, which is very beautiful. So I want to thank you all for being willing to share those memories with all of us tonight. And I think, Eileen, it was you who said earlier, I believe, that sanctuary is a lifelong movement. And I think it's so clear from hearing these stories from 40 years ago that the need for the sanctuary movement and the need for our activism and our solidarity and our love and friendship with each other is still very present today. And that there are a new generation of activists who are working on their advocacy, who are stepping up and doing the work, or maybe people who are just getting involved for the first time. And so I want to invite all of you to share just a few minutes of what your words of wisdom are for this next generation of activists or people who are just getting started, what your words of encouragement and advice are. And maybe, Eileen, we can start with you.
Thank you, Ella. And thank you for giving all of us here so much hope by picking up and continuing the good work. I would like to quote the other Jesuit theologian who worked closely with Jesuit John Cortina, who's a dear, dear friend, John Sovrino. We invited him when I was the director of the Share Foundation in 1986 and had just gone to Washington, D.C. And we invited John Sobrino to come to DC and John Cortina to receive the Share Foundation's first annual award for their work advancing human rights. And he was going to speak. It coincided with the National Sanctuary Conference that was being held. And he said, so what should I say? I said, tell us what we should do, John. Tell us what you need. What's your advice to us? So in 1986, he says, he gets up and there's 300 people in the auditorium and we're having a meal. And John Sovrino, this world famous theologian, says, 3 things we need from you. First, stay close to the people. Cerca al pueblo, be close to the people, those who are suffering. 2, change the policies that are killing us, that are harming our people. And I think today he would add Mother Earth. And 3, reparations. We must do the repair work. There's been so much that's been broken. And reparation is a prerequisite to reconciliation, which is the long-term goal. That was 1986. In 1989, John Sobrino, who lived at the Catholic University in the residence of the Jesuits behind the Rose Garden, was at a conference on refugees in Thailand when his 6 brothers were brutally assassinated along with Elva and Selena, shot point blank in the middle of the night by members of the elite Atlacathal Brigade, trained, financed by the United States government. It was devastating. And he was received in California by Tessa Ruverall, Peggy O'Grady, Santa Clara University, the leaders of the sanctuary movement then in San Francisco. And he stayed here until it was safe to go back. And I was privileged to bring Monsignor Rioste to visit John. He was the first Salvadoran from El Salvador who John saw after this terrible atrocity. And we met in Santa Clara, and they invited me to stay. And John was still devastated, but it was a beautiful thing to see the brotherhood between these 2 men who loved each other and the grief that they shared. And John turned to me and he said, I told you there were 3 things we needed, Eileen. Stay close to the people, change the policies that are killing us, reparations. And he says, I have a 4th. And the fourth was keep singing. Keep singing. We must find the joy or it will destroy our hearts. So that would be the wisdom I offer to all of us, that no matter how bleak, to dip into the community that's living and the community of saints that have left us but stick with us. And we must keep singing and dancing.
Thank you so much, Eileen. That's such really beautiful words for us to all follow, to remember to keep singing, to keep dancing, no matter what is happening or what's ahead. Thank you so much. Jose Cartagena, would you like to share any words of wisdom with this next generation of activists?
We were the receptive of the love given to us, and the translation was the support that East Sanctuary Cabinet and the North American community give to us. And when Eileen was talking, stay close to the people. And this is a movement that is for a lifetime. And we also can identify that the struggle and the suffering of our people continue, and how we can continue singing, how we can continue loving each other, how we can continue staying closest with people. Probably we don't have the Mesa Grande's refugee camp anymore, but probably we have a movement who is suffering in Honduras, the environment that we may need to be close to, that probably we need to accompany. The same way we accompany the Mesa Grande refugees, maybe we need to accompany the movement that is fighting for land, is fighting for for water in other countries, in Honduras, in Latin America. And how we can, because how we can share the love. That, and I don't know how to express that one, but yeah, I just want to emphasize, thank you, because thank you. That's all I can say at this moment.
Well, thank you, Jose. I think we have so much gratitude for you, and to so beautifully put the ways that we can and should and will hopefully accompany those continuing on this journey, looking for sanctuary, looking for freedom, looking to return power back to the land and to the earth and to its resources. Thank you so much. Locke, could we hear from you?
Yes, thank you. I think our communities with Central America and the US government's role, our histories and our future are so much intertwined now, and the struggle does continue. And I'm often reflecting on one of my dad's favorite quotes from Rabbi Abraham Heschel, which was that it only takes one person and another and another and another to start a movement. And I look at EBSC right now celebrating 40 years, and I know that that's what happened. And we see it here, and it's a great thing. And so I would say my advice is to accept the invitation. And I think the invitations came to me often, started in 1987 when my dad said, I think you should go on a delegation now to El Salvador. And it was for March 24th, 1987, for Romero's anniversary. I encourage people to accept the invitation. I heard Maureen invite people to be a part of EBSC. There's an invitation. And I'm pretty sure that Jose Artiga is going to invite people to go on a delegation. And I'm sure there's many other invitations to come. And I encourage everyone, even if you've accepted an invitation in the past, try again, accept another one. And it may be for a small thing and it may be for something bigger. But I think what we all found through all of our stories is that every invitation we accepted, we received so much more than what we ever could have hoped to give.
Thank you, Locke. It's so clear that it's never too early or too late for that to accept that invitation. And it can be life-changing and transformative. Thank you so much. Marilyn and Bob, would either or both of you like to share anything?
I'll make mine brief. I guess you've seen I've got my hands behind my head. It's because I'm frustrated with the things. I want to reach out. Jose Cartagena, Jose Artiga, Lux. I want to reach out and hug you. Boy, I want to hug you. Now that includes a whole new bunch of people. I'm so glad, Ella, to hear from you, we're now a larger community. And I want to speak just a second to the methodology of our moving forward into the future and remind us that that each of the traditions has been in sanctuary. And I remember Buddhists and Jews and Christians and Islam, everybody's participating in this, and everybody I find at the core of the heart of their teachings is this moving forward into the future with nonviolent force. We are going to work for justice, and we're not going to do it passively. We are going to work for justice together with love. And it will be nonviolent because that's the only thing that really works. And that's my message. How about you, Mackenzie?
I was going to ask Jose, what is the stance of the church in El Salvador these days about issues of justice?
Was that Jose Artiga?
Yeah.
Yeah, we partnered so much with the church in El Salvador of many denominations when we were, and they led much of our efforts.
Yeah.
That's a very hard question. But I think the church, in a way, is what we make out of it, believing that we are the church. There might be bishops and there might be, priests, far away, but the ones near the people are the ones that make the church. In terms of, what to do, I am an economist, and in that field, you start by believing that you have limited resources. With limited resources, you have to maximize. So you need to find that seed that has the spark, to support. And there might be 1,000 asks, but not all of them have the spark. The refugees, the people in the community that are willing to put their part, and what we add, will be a value added. One of those sparks, is a movement in El Salvador, in Honduras, in many countries in the South, to plant crops that will produce food. We call it in El Salvador the seeds for hope. In Honduras, we call it Vamos a la Milpa, but it's a basic principle, and it's a very revolutionary principle. Produce your own food. This goes back to the native, Aztecs and Lencas, and all the indigenous communities that you plant, but you need to respect, Mother Earth. You talk to the trees, you talk to the rivers, you talk to the mountains, and you reach an agreement, that we will not destroy our environment, our mother, but we can produce food. So that's, a concrete example of how we can support the spark that has energy, that has hope. And my second 2 cents will be walk with the people. Don't read too much, don't analyze too much, don't get numbers, because you will get frustrated. When you start seeing the numbers and when you start seeing the statistics, And there are some, people that are professionals at painting a bleak picture, and the picture is bad. But when you go to the people, when you start physically walking, and talking and listening, just, quiet, take notes, ask questions, ask many questions, and work with the people. We at SHARE are very proud to have organized over 10,000 delegates that in the last 41 years have gone to Central America. Organizing one person takes a lot of energy. Organizing 10,000 takes a ton of energy, but believe me, each person that returns comes back with a different view and with some hope, to continue in the struggle. Last, I will say, educate and invite the 2-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 15-year-old, the 92-year-old. Invite these young people, and I mentioned that 92-year-old as a young person when they have energy, when they want to risk. But start early. We cannot start too late. And I applaud, the youth in EBSC. It's a wonderful to see your energy and your vision, and we are going to learn much more from you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jose, and to all the other speakers for sharing those really important words of encouragement, of wisdom, words of just advancement to encourage all of us to stay close to each other, to the people, and to the earth. And especially Jose, I thank you for touching upon protecting and working together to support the land. And I think that's very much connected to, for those of you who don't know, East Bay Sanctuary Covenant. One of our programs around education and advocacy and storytelling is ASV, which stands for Amplifying Sanctuary Voices, which is our storytelling oral history arm of EBSC, where we're gathering and sharing stories from different people in our community. And one of our focuses for this year is climate justice and climate migration, and how those affect our communities, especially our refugee, immigrant, and asylum-seeking communities. So thank you for bringing that to the present. We have a few minutes left, and I want to open up the floor to questions from our attendees. If you haven't already, you can use the Q&A box to type in a question. I know some people have but also sharing and answering questions in the chat. And I appreciate those who are answering, because it is a good reminder that all of us have so much wisdom, and so many people watching are also people who've been part of the sanctuary movement for years, and we appreciate everything you do as well. One question that I believe Richard Olive had was, what are the primary activities of the sanctuary movement in the Bay Area today? Would anyone like to share answers to that question? What are some of the main things happening right now in the Bay Area in the sanctuary movement? And I invite any of the speakers to jump in and answer that.
Ask Sister Maureen.
Yeah.
Yes, we'd love to hear from you, sister. I think you need to unmute. There you are. You're good now.
Right. Well, generally speaking, over, in 40 years, things change. They get different. I'm not saying better, because there's not much that would be able to meet the emotional beauty, interest, pain that you have shared, and I could share so much of that too, because I lived in the refugee camps, and so much more. And one of the things before I leave EBSC is to take a delegation to El Mozote. That was one of the things that I was thinking that would be a wonderful thing to do, and how I would love to invite, all of you, or as many people who have so much to offer, who know the history, who love that history. And for me, I've been very dedicated to El Mozote and the pain and the horror and all of that. Anyway, so that's just one of my dreams coming up into the future, and I will be inviting all of you. I'd be inviting you, Jose, too. I'm sure you would be a great leader. But with Manuel de Paz, Manuel and I have many conversations about that. And I think that would really fit in so well with our charism, with the Franciscan care, and with Ed Dunn, Brother Ed Dunn. One of the last delegations that I have been on was with Brother Ed Dunn. It wasn't the last, but it was one of the last. And the humor and the joy and the pain and all of that was just, just absolutely unbelievable. So when you think of East Bay Sanctuary today, we have gone through many changes. We have a staff right now of 30 plus 29 contractors. And we are very, very busy about what we do, about how we accompany the people. We have people from 60 or 70 countries in the world right now that we minister to. We do asylum cases, of course. We have 5 attorneys, and we have generally staff. You can subtract most of the others. The rest of our staff are are paralegals, and then we have started some new programs for social justice, trauma-informed programs, and so on. So, and of course, Manuel de Paz, who is the brother of Tulio. Manuel has been with us now for 16 years, and he's just such an inspiration. And he has a story that just captures anybody's heart and soul, after having lost 21 people in his own family, etc. So one of the things that we have been moving into very much, as Ella said, is sharing our stories. And the connection with Sanctuary and amplifying Sanctuary voices is just a really wonderful connection. It links the two, the where we have been and where we are and where we are going. So we also have the interfaith movement for human integrity with what's her name, Lee? Debbie, just for the moment, I had that senior moment, Debbie Lee. So Debbie does just wonderful work and invites us in when we can. And we do participate, we do, for example, we attend events around Sanctuary, and there are just so many of them, like Remain in Mexico. We've had some of our staff have gone to the border, have been working on the border, accompanying people on the border, and et cetera, et cetera. So a great amount of our work, of course, is technical because of the fact that we're doing asylum cases, and when you do asylum cases, you have to be on all the time. But then, the wonderful thing about that is that our way of accompanying people is to give them a chance to become who they want to be, and this is what they say. They say, so often they will say to us, "You have changed my life. You have changed the lives of my families. You have changed the lives even of my parents." They can bring their parents and so much. So there's so much joy in all of that. And another part of it is, of course, the lawsuits that we have been involved in over the years, quite a few lawsuits, mainly through the ACLU, but others as well. And I just wanted to mention, of course, we're very involved in TPS, and we have gone to Washington, D.C. to advocate 3 or 4 times in there. And we have AOC came out and spoke with us and stood with us and accompanied us. She gave us sanctuary when we were there, not so very long. And the great thing about it is that Caresen has just won a lawsuit against the government, which favors TPS, which this just happened, like we got word yesterday, and we weren't sure that it could be true, but it actually is true. So this is a wonderful move for a large number of Tepecianos now, that they will be able to move on towards residency, etc. So we do a lot of many things, but our focus, of course, if you have it went very much in the legal area. However, we use the legal area to tell the stories, and their stories are just unbelievable. So We do a lot of storytelling just around the cases that we do, and that's one of the great things. So that's only one. That's only one of the areas. We could go into some more. Then the religious orders, have always been very involved in sanctuary. They still are involved. We have to support our programs, etc. So they will remind us that they're still with us by giving donations, etc. So that's wonderful. But of course, and of course, that's another way of sharing delegations is with the religious orders, the religious congregations. And my congregation has been super involved. In fact, they called me yesterday to say that the TPS, the Tepastianos, have won a lawsuit. So that was wonderful. So somebody won, I think it was Manuel de Paz, said, wow, aren't they connected? Where Washington, D.C. is 3 hours, ahead. So that's one of the reasons. But we do just a whole lot. And with what we're doing right now, in terms of social services, moving out, much beyond. We have quite, Manuel de Paz has been involved in community development and education and developing of leadership and all of that. And it sort of all winds itself into the storytelling and the change that has been taking place in lives. And
thank you, sister. I just want to be mindful of our time, but thank you for sharing all the amazing things that EBSC is doing. And I think that's a great place for people who are part of the movement or are returning to it or new to it, is to visit EBSC's website if you haven't, and learn about all these amazing things. And sister, I so appreciate you talking about the storytelling that is integrated in a lot of the services that EBSC provides. And I think it's a great way to tie it all together. Tonight, it was so special to listen to these stories and to learn so much from all of these leaders of the movement, and to know that the story continues, that people are continuing to do amazing work around sanctuary, and EBSC is doing amazing work. I know that we're just about out of time now, so I want to thank, first of all, just our incredible speakers, Jose, Cartagena, Eileen, Walk, Jose Artiga, Marilyn, Bob, also for sharing, and sister, thank you so much for sharing so much tonight. I feel privileged to be in the space with you and to listen. And thank you to the EBSC staff, especially Lisa Hoffman and the ASV leaders for helping organize this event. And thank you for everyone who's listened and shared and kept the chat active with thoughts and reflections and memories. EBSC is collecting photos and memories from our broader community to celebrate this 40th anniversary year. So if you go to the EBSC anniversary page, there's a section called Share Your Story, which I think is in the chat, but you can share photos or memories also, so we can all remember so many moments from the movement. We do want to remind folks this is a by donation fundraiser, so you can text EBSC to 91999 or go to the link that's in the chat if you want to donate and support some of the great work that Sister Maureen mentioned that EBSC is doing. And we hope you'll join us at EBSC's 40th anniversary spring reception on Saturday, May 14th. It'll be in person at St. John's Presbyterian Church in Berkeley, and you can also attend via live stream. You can go to East Sanctuary /40th anniversary to learn more. I'll invite our panelists now who have been so awesome you can turn off your screens if you'd like. And we're going to close our webinar with a slideshow of different photos and memories from the sanctuary movement over the years. And so with that, I want to say, please enjoy the slideshow, and thank you all so much for an incredible evening. Thank you all and take care.
thank you, Ella. Thanks, Ella.